Some bodies heal with scars. Arden's healed with gardens. At first, it was just one flower. Small, harmless, beautiful. The problem with beautiful wounds is how easy they are to ignore right up until they cover everything. Sunlight arrived before Arden did. It slipped through the blinds in pale bars, laying quiet, golden ladders across the bed, the dresser, the stack of unread books. It found her shoulder where it lay bare above the sheets, and lingered there, warm and patient, as if waiting for her to notice something she didn't have yet. She woke to the feeling that someone had placed a thumbprint of warmth over her collarbone. Not pain, not itch, just presence. She lay still for a moment, eyes half open, listening. The apartment hummed around her. Refrigerator murmur. Pipes exhaling. Traffic a muted river 3 floors down. Beside her, Leo snored softly into his pillow, one arm flung out in a loose arc that almost but didn't quite touch her wrist. Arden lifted her hand and pressed her fingertips to the warm spot and felt petals. Not cloth, not bandage, petals. Thin and soft and layered, as if someone had pinned a corsage directly to her skin. She sat up slowly, heartbeat picking up speed. The flower was about the size of a coin. 5 petals, their edges fringed delicately. The color was a shy, almost embarrassed pink, deepening toward the center where a faint bioluminescent warmth pulsed like a tiny second heartbeat. It wasn't resting on her. It was growing from her. Stem fused seamlessly into the skin. No break, no wound, no blood. Just a smooth transition from human to something else. "Okay," she whispered, as if the flower might be startled by volume. "That's new." She tried logic first. Dream. Residual medication. Allergic reaction. Her brain flipping yesterday's grocery store bouquet into a sensory misunderstanding. But when she pinched a petal gently between finger and thumb, it responded, flexing, shivering, edging slightly toward her touch like a plant turning for light. No pain, no numbness, just a subtle echo in her chest, an emotion she couldn't quite name. Leo shifted beside her. Alarm?" he muttered, face still mashed into the pillow. "Not yet," she said automatically, eyes fixed on the bloom. "Go back to sleep." He grunted something that might have been consent and rolled toward the wall. Arden slid off the bed and padded to the bathroom. The mirror above the sink showed her hair squashed on one side, pillow crease tattooed across her cheek, eyes puffy with the residue of not enough sleep. And there, just below the notch of her collarbone, the flower appeared like a deliberate adornment. It suited her in a way that annoyed her, like the universe had tried accessorizing without asking. She leaned closer. The petals breathed. Not literally, but they expanded slightly as she inhaled and compressed with her exhale, the timing too perfect to dismiss. The glow in the center brightened when she frowned, and dimmed when she forced her expression to neutral, as if the flower were watching her face and taking notes. Arden turned on the tap, ran cool water over her fingers, and carefully tried to slide a fingernail under the lowest petal, testing if it would peel away. The petal twitched and then lay flat again. Her chest tightened, that same echo, like an old memory being tapped with a fingernail. It felt like the moment just before you admit something to yourself. She drew back, dripping water into the sink. The flower's glow steadied, Right, she said to her reflection. We're ignoring you for now. She grabbed a t-shirt from the hook on the door. Soft, black, a little oversized, and pulled it on, the cotton grazing the bloom. The flower shivered, then settled, hidden, almost hidden. As she brushed her teeth, petals began to accumulate in the sink. Not from the shirt, not from any bouquet. From her breath. Every exhale sent a faint shimmer into the air, translucent fragments barely visible until they landed on porcelain. Each one vanished when she blinked, leaving only the impression that something had been there. When she spat toothpaste and rinsed, the water in the basin rippled faintly pink before clearing. She stared a little too long. From the bedroom, Leo called, voice thick with sleep. Arden? You up? She turned off the tap. The flower under her collarbone pulsed. Once. Quick. Like a secret checking if it was still safe. Yeah, she said. I'm up. She didn't mention the bloom. Not yet. The problem with beautiful wounds, she told herself, is that they look better when you pretend they're decoration. By the time Leo wandered into the bathroom, Arden had convinced herself she'd overreacted. She'd showered without daring to look down, eyes fixed stubbornly on the tile grout as water drummed over her shoulders. The flower had tingled once when the water hit it, not unpleasant, just aware. When she finally shut the tap off and wiped steam from the mirror, the bloom was still there. If anything, it looked fresher, the petals dewy, glow a touch brighter. No redness, no swelling, no obvious go to the hospital yesterday signs. Weird, she decided. Not dire. She'd thrown on jeans and the black t-shirt again, tugging the collar slightly higher than usual, then escaped to the kitchen to make tea and pretend nothing had changed. She was rinsing her mug when she heard Leo's toothbrush pause mid-scrub. Ah, he said, eloquently. Arden? Her spine flashed hot. Yeah? Did you buy flowers and chop them up in here or something? Her heart thumped in her throat. What? He popped his head out of the bathroom doorway, toothpaste foam at the corner of his mouth, eyebrows doing that confused tilt she liked more than she'd admit. There are petals in the sink, he said. Like, a lot of them. Her palms went cold. She walked over, every step measured. The sink wasn't full, not dramatic, but there were at least a dozen petals scattered around the drain, clinging to the curve of the bowl. They weren't from any flower she recognized. They were too thin, almost translucent, veins glowing faintly like backlit skin. Some had curled at the edges. Others looked freshly fallen. She reached in and touched one. It dissolved on contact, not melting, vanishing, as if it had only been waiting for her to admit it was real. Okay, that's new, Leo said slowly, rinsing his mouth. Are you experimenting with bath bombs? Rituals? Witchcraft? His eyes were kind, teasing, but there was a thread of real concern under it. Arden's mind scrambled for a neutral explanation. Laundry lint. Old potpourri dislodged from a vent. Hallucination. The flower under her shirt warmed, as if eavesdropping. I think it's a plumbing issue, she said too fast. Maybe something backed up from the pipes. Like, I don't know. Someone above us tossed flowers and they floated down. Gravity, betrayal. Classic. Leo eyed the sink. Your building is many things, he said, but I don't think it can reverse confetti us from above. He flicked water from his fingers. Tiny droplets landed near one of the petals. The spot it touched brightened briefly, then winked out, the petal fading with it. You sure you're okay? He asked, turning to her, searching her face. Arden forced a smile that felt like slipping into a costume she'd worn 1,000 times. Yeah, I'm fine. Just weird old pipes. He looked like he didn't buy it fully, but he also knew her boundaries well enough not to press. He nodded, leaned in, kissed her forehead, lips lingering a moment longer than usual. All right, he said. We'll call it weird old pipes for now. But if the sink starts growing vines, I'm moving us to a concrete bunker. When he left the room, the petals around the drain shivered. 3 more dropped silently from the air, landing in a little crescent. The arrangement reminded her of a particular shape, a curve of shoulder, the angle of a door left half closed. She stared until the kettle shrieked from the kitchen, breaking the spell. By the time she glanced back, the petals were gone. That evening, rain stitched soft silver lines down the glass. Arden and Leo sat on the couch, legs tangled under a shared blanket. Laptops open, but mostly ignored. Warm lamplight pooled around them, turning their little living room into a safe, golden bubble. The flower had multiplied. There were 3 now, the original at her collarbone, a second just under her left ear, nestled against the jawline, pale yellow with a faint citrus scent, and a tiny bud at the base of her wrist, half formed, its petals still tightly furled. She'd told herself she could hide them. High collar, hair down, long sleeves, safe. But the collar of her t-shirt had slipped as she reached for her tea. Leo's eyes tracked the movement, then froze on the small burst of color peeking out. Arden, he said quietly. What is that? Her first instinct was to tug the fabric up. Her second was to lie. Her third, the quietest, most exhausted part of her, wanted to say I don't know, but I'm scared. She swallowed. Just something weird, she said, aiming for lightness. Probably nothing. Probably a stress rash. He didn't laugh. Leo set his mug down and shifted closer, gentle but deliberate. Can I see it? He asked. She hesitated. The flower under her collarbone warmed, then pulsed, as if answering for her. Okay, she said, exhale shaking more than she liked. But don't freak out. She tugged the neckline down, exposing the bloom. Leo's breath caught, not in horror, more in startled awe. Whoa, he whispered. It's beautiful. That wasn't the reaction she'd expected. You don't think it's gross? She asked. He huffed a soft laugh. I mean, if you wanted to commit to a bit, you could have just asked a tattoo artist. But no, not gross, definitely weird, but also kind of incredible. He reached out slowly. Can I? She nodded, throat too tight for words. His fingertips brushed the edge of a petal. The flower responded like a small animal leaning into touch, and Arden felt it. Not on her skin, in her chest. A rush of something. The smell of late summer asphalt after rain. The sound of a door slamming downstairs. The feeling of standing in a kitchen at 14, holding a backpack, and deciding not to say goodbye. A very specific kind of fear. Old, quiet, unresolved. She jerked back with a sharp inhale. Sorry, Leo said immediately, withdrawing his hand. Too much? No, it's not you, she managed. It's like it. Remembered something. I know that sounds insane. He watched her for a long beat. You got a memory flash? Kind of. She touched the blossom herself. The sensation returned in a softer echo. That same teenage kitchen fear, but further away. Like hearing your own voice on an old tape. The flower's glow shifted, deepening from shy pink to a richer rose, almost red, at the very center. It changed color, Leo said, when you touched it. And when I did. It's reacting to you. To how I react, Arden murmured. She let her mind drift intentionally towards something lighter. The first time she and Leo had danced badly in this living room, him stepping on her toes and apologizing too many times, her laughing into his shoulder, safe and stupidly happy. Warmth flushed under her fingertips. The petals brightened, poured soft gold at the edges. Leo let out a breathy, disbelieving laugh. Okay, so your skin is mood jewelry now. Please don't ever call it that again, she said, but she was half smiling, half terrified. He sobered. Do you want to see a doctor? He asked gently. Or a botanist? I genuinely don't know which. I'll call my GP tomorrow, she said. Get laughed at. Become her favorite story for the next 10 years. He leaned his head against hers. Hey, I'll come with you, he promised. We can both be the weird plant couple. Very on brand. As the rain thickened outside, the bud at her wrist unfurled a tiny amount, revealing a flash of deep violet. Arden didn't notice yet, but her body did. The exam room smelled like disinfectant and coffee. Arden sat on the padded table in a thin cotton gown, feet dangling, hands folded in her lap. The flowers were no longer subtle. 5 now. The original. The jawline bloom. The wrist blossom. A new one just below her ribs on the right side. And a small cluster at the back of her neck, where she couldn't see them without a second mirror. Leo occupied the single plastic visitor chair, elbows on knees, trying not to look as worried as he felt. Dr. Mendez tapped on a tablet, brows furrowed. She was usually brisk and dry-humored. The sort of doctor who wore scrubs covered in cartoon organs and said things like, "Your anxiety is lying to you," in a matter-of-fact tone Arden appreciated. Right now, there was no cartoon anywhere in her demeanor. So Dr. Mendez said slowly, "You're telling me these appeared overnight?" Mostly, Arden said. One at first, then others. They keep showing up. Any itching? Burning? Fever? No. Just warmth. And she hesitated. Feelings. Dr. Mendez looked up. Feelings. Memories, kind of. When they're touched. Or when I think about certain things. Leo added. They change color too. When she shifts moods. It's reactive. Dr. Mendez took a breath that said, "I went to med school for this," and gestured. "May I?" Arden nodded. The doctor donned gloves and gently examined the collarbone bloom first, then the one at Arden's jaw, murmuring to herself. Up close, the petals didn't look synthetic. They had faint imperfections, tiny veins, microscopic pollen grains clinging to their tips. The skin where the stems met body tissue showed no inflammation, no scarring, just a seamless integration. Dr. Mendez tried, very carefully, to lift one petal edge with tweezers. The petal twitched and lay flat again. Arden flinched, a rush of embarrassment from her teenage years bubbling up unbidden, a memory of being laughed at in front of a classroom. The flower's hue deepened, flush of red at the center. Dr. Mendez froze. That was not in any of my textbooks. She stepped back, stripped the gloves, and reached for a small handheld scanner. "Humor me," she said. "I'm going to run an ultrasound. See what's going on under the skin." The screen lit up with grayscale cross-sections. Among the expected structures, bone, muscle, vessels, a web of delicate threads branched outward from each bloom's anchor point. They looked like roots, but they didn't invade or displace anything. They wove through her, as if her body had grown around them. "I'm not seeing tumor growth," Dr. Mendez said, voice a touch hollow. "No necrosis, no obvious vascular compromise. Whatever this is, it's stable. For now." "Is it dangerous?" Leo asked. Dr. Mendez chewed the inside of her cheek. "I don't have enough data to answer that. We'll run blood work, panels, imaging, but I can tell you what it isn't, which is sometimes the only comfort I have. It isn't behaving like cancer. It isn't behaving like an infection. It isn't behaving like anything I've seen." She turned to Arden. "You said it reacts to memories?" Arden nodded, fingers curling into the exam paper. "When I touched it last night, I remembered being 14, not saying something I should have, feeling small. When Leo touched it, it felt similar but less intense, like it preferred my version." "The patient's subjective experience," Dr. Mendez murmured, half to herself. "Psychosomatic overlay? Or something else?" She tapped a few notes, then looked up, face softening. "Okay, here's my non-professional human opinion. Whatever this is, your body doesn't seem to be in crisis. It's adapting, doing something strange. But you're not in immediate danger that I can see. That gives us room." "Room for what?" Arden asked. "To watch," Dr. Mendez said. "To document. To not panic. And maybe, if you're willing, to listen to it." "Listen," Arden echoed dryly. "To the flowers growing out of me." The doctor's lip twitched. "Our bodies have always been shouting at us," she said. "Pain, fatigue, tension, all messages. Maybe yours just switched to subtitles." As they left, lab orders in hand, Arden caught sight of herself in the metal edge of a cabinet. For a split second, her reflection held more blooms than she actually had. A collar of flowers, a cascade down one arm, and then the image snapped back to normal. She decided not to mention that part. That night, the flowers woke before she did. Arden slept on her side, facing the window. Moonlight filtered through the curtains, painting ghost lace on the wall. Leo's arm folded loosely over her waist, his breath warm against the back of her neck. As her breathing deepened, the blooms brightened. The collarbone flower glowed softly, casting a rose-tinted halo on the sheets. The one at her jaw released a faint citrus fragrance, slicing through the usual nighttime dullness. The bud at her wrist unfurled another millimeter, showing a heart of deep violet, almost black. The cluster at the back of her neck pulsed in unison with her dreams. Inside her head, a familiar scene replayed. A hallway lined with closed doors, voices arguing behind. One muffled teenage Arden standing in the middle, fingers digging into the strap of her backpack. Wanting to knock, wanting to leave, doing neither. In the dream, she took a step toward the door. The flowers brightened. In reality, her fingers twitched, brushing Leo's wrist. He stirred, half waking, eyes blinking open to a world that had shifted while he slept. For a few disorienting seconds, he thought the room was on fire, soft flickers of light licking the walls. Then his eyes adjusted, and he saw the glow was coming from her. Petals, luminous, resting against his arm, his chest, her own skin. The light was not harsh, not surgical. It felt like candlelight caught in glass. "Arden," he whispered, voice raspy with sleep. "Hey, love." She murmured something unintelligible, caught between dream and waking. He propped himself up on an elbow, careful not to disturb her too much, and watched the way the blooms appeared to breathe. As she exhaled, a few tiny petals drifted into the air, suspended for a moment like motes of dust, before gently settling on the sheets and dissolving into nothing. He reached out and brushed a fingertip along the bud at her wrist. First contact, warmth, a static tingle. Then, a rush of emotion hit him sideways. He was not in his own body for a heartbeat. He was younger, smaller, her perspective. Not his, standing in a crowded room, everyone taller, everyone louder. The sense of wanting to ask for help and not knowing what words would make it past the teeth. He pulled back, inhaling sharply. Arden flinched in her sleep, the bloom at her wrist flashing a deeper violet, then softening. "Sorry," he whispered instinctively, stroking her forearm in a comforting arc. "Didn't mean to wake you." She didn't stir again, but the flowers dimmed to a gentler glow, as if approving of his gentler touch. Leo lay back down, staring at the dark ceiling bathed in subtle color. There was awe in him, and fear, and a fierce tenderness he didn't know where to put. He knew two things, with absolute certainty. This wasn't going away on its own. He wasn't going anywhere either. In the corner of the room, where shadows pooled, something almost like a vine traced itself briefly along the wall, not physically, just in reflected light, a suggestion of future overgrowth. When dawn seeped in, pale and indifferent, the flowers went shy again, their glow tucking inward, like secrets waiting for their next chance to speak. Arden hated being outside while the flowers were awake. But the grocery store was unavoidable, and Leo had insisted she shouldn't go alone, which somehow made her more determined to go alone. Something about knowing people would look, whether out of concern or curiosity, made her stomach tighten. People were already unpredictable with normal things. Add blossoms and bioluminescence, she knew exactly the kind of attention she'd draw. She wore a turtleneck despite the heat, sleeves pulled to her wrists, collar high enough to hide all blooms but the one at the back of her neck, which she hoped the angle of her hair could conceal. She made it 5 minutes before the syndrome betrayed her. In the produce aisle, as she lifted a bag of oranges, 3 faint petals drifted from her sleeve and fluttered down into the display like confetti, pale yellow, light as dust. A couple landed between the oranges and clung to the dimpled rinds. A woman nearby frowned at the unexpected color. Is that part of the fruit? Arden's breath caught. She shoved the bag back, murmured an apology, and turned away quickly. Her heart thudded a little too hard. Her skin prickled under the turtleneck as if the flowers were suffocating under the fabric, or protesting being hidden. She made it another 2 aisles before a stranger passed her, paused, inhaled. "Do you smell that?" he asked his friend. "Like fresh flowers?" Arden's pulse skittered. She kept her eyes down and moved faster, resisting the urge to clamp her hands over her sleeves. Every step left a faint trail, petals dissolving behind her like footprints that didn't want to remain evidence. Halfway through checkout, her wrist bloom unfurled fully, releasing a brief pulse of violet light that shimmered beneath the fabric. A small girl in line behind her gasped softly. "Mom," she whispered, tugging a sleeve. "She sparkles." Arden's face burned. She paid with trembling fingers, hurried out, and stepped into the sunlit parking lot where the air felt cooler, freer. As she crossed toward her car, a breeze lifted her hair, exposing the bloom at the back of her neck. A man walking by froze mid-step, eyes widening. "Whoa, that's..." Arden ducked into her car before he could finish. Inside, she pressed her forehead to the steering wheel, breath trembling. The flowers warmed sympathetically, as if sensing her distress. The one at her jawline released a faint citrus scent, the same one it had the first morning, as though offering comfort. "I can't hide you forever," she whispered to them. "But not yet. Not like this." One petal drifted down onto her lap. This one didn't dissolve immediately. It stayed long enough for her to notice the color. Not pink, not yellow, not violet. Silver. Moonlight silver. She touched it with a fingertip. It held its shape. Then it dimmed and disappeared. Not dissolved. Just faded. Like something waiting its turn. The violet bloom was the one that scared her. It appeared fully the next morning, opening from its tight bud in a single quiet unfurl. Petals the color of bruised twilight, edges fading into near black. It sat just above the curve of her spine, slightly to the left, where she could only see it with a mirror angled just right. When she touched it, the world tilted. Memory flashed. Not imagery, but sensation. The feeling of standing at the threshold of a doorway she once swore never to cross again. Her palm pressing against chipped paint. A voice on the other side, muffled, low, angry, familiar. She jerked her hand back as if burned. The flower's glow deepened, pulsing irregularly, almost like a warning. Leo noticed immediately when she walked into the kitchen. "You're pale," he said, moving toward her. "Arden, talk to me." She shook her head, sinking into a chair. "It's another one. And it's not like the others." "Let me see?" She hesitated, then nodded. She felt him gently sweep her hair aside. The touch made the bloom flare a near black violet. He inhaled sharply. "Arden, this one feels heavy." "It's a bad memory," she whispered. "You remember it?" "No, that's the problem. My body does. And it won't let me ignore it." Leo exhaled slowly. His arms wrapped around her shoulders, grounding her. The violet bloom pulsed again, but this time, the rhythm softened slightly, as if calming in his presence. She leaned into him, eyes closing. "Whatever this is," he murmured into her hair, "you don't have to handle it alone." She nodded, but a part of her, the part that birthed the violet bloom, didn't believe him. Not yet. 2 days later, the house bloomed. It wasn't dramatic all at once. It was subtle, the kind of change you only notice after it's already happened. Petals began appearing in corners, gathering against baseboards like dust that refused to stay dull. Thin trails of luminous pollen traced faint arcs along the hardwood floor, visible only in low light. The air smelled faintly of summer rain and something sweeter, something like honeysuckle mixed with grief. Arden woke one morning to a thin layer of soft pink petals on the bedroom floor, as if someone had emptied a bouquet gently across the space. By afternoon, the living room was dusted in gold. The kitchen held small clusters of pale violet, drifting from nowhere. Leo swept them into piles, but they dissolved the moment his broom touched them. "We're living inside a botanical screensaver," he muttered, half in awe, half in overwhelmed resignation. Arden knelt to pick up a petal that hadn't dissolved yet. A pale yellow one with faint emotion-laced veins. When she held it to her chest, a memory flickered. Leo laughing in the rain the night they met. The warm press of his palm against hers. The breathless, impossible hope of maybe. The petal brightened into gold and then disappeared gently into her skin. Not absorbed. Acknowledged. Leo watched her, expression softening. "What did you see?" "Not a bad one?" she whispered. "A good memory, for once." A flush spread over her collarbone bloom. A shimmering rose hue of gratitude. But beneath it, hidden from view unless she twisted just right, the violet bloom pulsed its steady warning. The transformation happened overnight. Arden woke to the sound of dripping, soft, rhythmic, inconsistent. At first she thought it was the leaking bathroom faucet again, but the air felt wrong, heavy, lush, humid. She stepped into the hallway and stopped. The guest room door stood slightly ajar. Light poured from the crack. Not lamplight, not sunlight. Something green and gold. Diffuse. Mist-like. She pushed the door open. Her breath left her entirely. Plants grew from every surface, but not normal plants. These were blossoms like hers. Bioluminescent petals. Vines that shimmered as if light ran through them instead of sap. Leaves thin as paper and glowing faintly from within. The walls pulsed with faint color, matching her heartbeat. The petals on the floor swirled in a slow, lazy pattern without wind. Leo appeared behind her, rubbing sleep from his eyes. He froze. "Arden." His voice cracked. "Your flowers are spreading." "No," she whispered, barely audible. "They're not spreading. They're remembering." "The house?" he said incredulously. "They're remembering through the house." She swallowed hard. Tears pricked her eyes. "This room. I haven't been in here for months." "Why?" "Because it reminds me of someone," she said softly. "Someone I lost." Leo moved closer, wrapping an arm around her waist. "Arden, why didn't you tell me?" Because, she said, voice trembling, I wasn't ready to feel it again. The flowers in the room glowed brighter, not accusing, not angry, inviting, encouraging. She stepped forward, bare feet sinking into soft petals. They swirled around her ankles like affectionate ghosts. It appeared that night. Arden sat at the edge of the bed, knees pulled to her chest, staring at her reflection in the dark corner mirror. The glimmering flowers across her skin glowed quietly in the half-light. Each one carried warmth, memory, truth, except the violet bloom, which pulsed with something colder. Her heartbeat stuttered when something new shifted beneath her ribs. A faint glow, luminous, not pink, not yellow, not violet, pure silver white. It drifted upward like it had no weight at all, hovering in front of her for several long seconds. A single petal. This one didn't fall. It hovered, suspended, waiting. Leo, she whispered, voice barely audible. It's here. He came to her side instantly. His breath hitched as he saw it floating, turning slowly in the air, like a leaf caught in a breeze that belonged to no room on earth. What does that one mean? He whispered. Arden swallowed. I think. Her voice trembled. I think it's the truth. The petal floated closer, stopping just a breath from her heart. She didn't touch it. She was terrified too. The petal pulsed once, sending a faint shiver down her sternum, and for the first time since the blooming began, Arden felt something she had been avoiding for years. Recognition. A memory that wasn't ready to surface, but wanted to, needed to. The violet bloom at her spine flared violently, almost black. The silver petal dimmed, and Arden whispered, I'm not ready. The petal stayed, patient, unfading, waiting for the moment she finally was. The flowers began to die before Arden did. It started at the edges. One morning, the collarbone bloom she'd first woken with had a browned petal tip, just one. A tiny crescent of dry at the very edge, like a page beginning to scorch. She touched it, expecting the familiar warmth of memory. The rush didn't come. Instead, she felt something else. A tiredness that wasn't quite physical. The exhaustion of a feeling held too long. Hey, Leo said softly from the doorway, towel around his shoulders, hair still damp from the shower. You okay? She nodded without looking up. They're changing. He crossed the room, kneeling in front of her so their eyes were level. Let me see. She pulled the collar aside. He studied the blossom, brow furrowing. It's fading. Is that good? She asked. Flowers die when they're done, when they've done their job. What job do you think this one had? He asked carefully. Her throat tightened, to hold something for me until I was ready. And are you? He asked. That's the question, isn't it? She said, a humorless little smile tugging at her mouth. What if I'm never ready? Outside, the rain thickened. The blooms across her skin trembled faintly, droplets forming on petals that never truly wet. Across the day, More edges browned, petals curled inward. Not all of them. Some remained stubbornly vibrant. But the oldest blooms lost their sheen one by one. Each time a petal loosened and fell, dissolving before it touched the floor. Arden felt a tiny unhooking inside. A thread snapping free. Not loss. Release. At night, in the glow of the greenhouse room, Arden stood barefoot among the plants that had grown from her. Some had withered. Some still shone. The air was thick with the smell of endings and something like beginnings. "You're changing," she whispered to them. They glowed in answer. Her sternum ached. Not like illness. Like something trying to reach the surface. It came for her on a night without rain. The sky outside was clear, stars faint above the city's haze. Inside, the apartment felt too still, as if everything were holding its breath. Arden lay on the couch, one arm draped over her eyes, Leo sitting nearby with a book he wasn't really reading. The silver-white petal still hovered in the bedroom waiting. She could feel it from here, a presence just beyond a wall, like a thought she refused to think. The violet bloom at her spine pulsed in a slow, insistent rhythm. "Leo," she said quietly. He looked up immediately. "Yeah. I think it wants me to remember," she said. "Not the flowers. The thing underneath them." He set the book aside and slid closer. "Do you want me here, or—" "I don't think I can do it without you," she admitted, voice barely above a whisper. He offered his hand. "Then I'm here." She took it. The contact steadied her enough to stand. They went to the bedroom together. The petal hovered where they'd left it, suspended before the mirror, slowly turning in place. Up close, Arden could see that its silver white wasn't uniform. Threads of color ran through it, pale pink, gold, violet, traces of every bloom she'd ever grown, woven into a single shard. "This is all of them," she murmured. "Every one I ignored." Leo squeezed her hand. "You don't have to show me," he said. "You can just feel it. Keep it yours." Her chest shook. "That's the problem, Leo. I did keep it mine. For too long." She let go of his hand. He didn't reach for her again. He stayed close but gave her the space to decide. The violet bloom flared almost black. The petal brightened. Arden took a breath that hurt all the way down, then lifted her fingers and touched the petal. The world tipped. She was no longer in the bedroom. She was 13, standing in the hallway of a house that smelled like stale coffee and disappointment. The wallpaper was peeling at the corners. A picture frame hung crooked. Behind a closed door, voices fought, sharp edges breaking glass, the sound of love when it had gone sour and sourer. Her own voice was small, hoarse from crying earlier. "Please stop," she'd whispered to the doorframe, knowing they couldn't hear her. "Please stop. Please stop." On the other side, a crash, a choked sob, a word she'd never repeat. She had options: knock, scream, call someone, run. She did none of them. She froze, back pressed to the wall, heart racing so fast it hurt. She knew that if she opened the door she would see something that would crack her in half, so she didn't. She let it happen in the dark, while she stared at the hallway ceiling and counted breaths, convincing herself that if she stayed still enough it wouldn't be real. Later, when the house was quiet and wrong, she stepped into the room and saw the aftermath, heard the sirens, answered questions with a careful, practiced blankness. She told herself for years that she'd been helpless. The truth was simpler, crueler. She'd been scared. And somewhere inside she'd decided that fear made her complicit. That was the moment she buried. Back in the bedroom, adult Arden gasped, hands still on the petal. Tears spilled over, hot and fast. "I didn't go in," she choked. "I didn't go in. I could have and I didn't, and they—" Leo was beside her in an instant, arms around her. "You were a child," he said, voice breaking. "Arden, you were a child." "I ran away without moving," she sobbed into his shoulder. "I left them alone in there. I left them to—" "You were a child," he repeated, holding her tighter. You were terrified. That is not a crime. The violet bloom's pulse faltered, then steadied. The petal glowed white-hot. Every flower on her body flared for a heartbeat. A chorus of colors then began to dim all at once. The memory did not vanish, but its shape shifted. Instead of jagged, it was clear. It still hurt. It always would. But the hurt was clean now, not infected by decades of a child's misassigned guilt. The silver petal, still under her fingers, began to disintegrate into light. Light didn't behave normally that night. Once the petal dissolved, the room filled with a softness that had no visible source. It wasn't brightness. It was warmth made visible. Arden staggered, gripping Leo's arm to steady herself. A pressure built behind her sternum, not painful, just insistent. A seed pushing against soil. I think. Her voice wavered. I think there's one more. He looked at her chest. Right between her ribs, over the center of her heart, a luminous shape began to form under the skin. Not a bud, not a scar. A swirl of color, spinning slowly, drawing threads from every other bloom across her body. The pink of first hurts, the gold of forgiven joys, the violet of unspoken fear. All of them unwinding, traveling under her skin like shooting stars, converging at a single point. She pressed her palm there, breath hitching. Leo's hand covered hers. The light pushed outward. The skin did not tear. It simply yielded, making way as if it had always known how. A flower unfurled from her chest, larger than all the others combined. Its petals were made of every color she'd ever carried. Blush pink, deep violet, burnished gold, cool silver, soft white. They shimmered and shifted, like stained glass catching different angles of light with each tiny movement. It didn't feel like an invasion. It felt like relief. Her knees buckled. Leo guided her down to the floor, holding her carefully as the bloom expanded and settled, cradled by her collarbones and ribs like a crown. Emotion poured through her, not scenes now, but pure feeling. The fear from the hallway, the shame she'd mistaken for guilt, the love she'd never stopped holding for the people behind that door, the anger she'd never allowed herself to voice, the years of silence. It all washed through her, not annihilating her, but rinsing her clean. She sobbed ugly, open, unrestrained. And the flower didn't close up. It opened further. Leo held her through every wave. You are not what happened, he murmured. You are the one who lived through it. That's all. That's enough. The last of the smaller blooms across her skin withered fully, petals falling off and dissolving before they reached the floor. Only the great flower at her chest remained. For the first time since it all began, Arden's body felt light, empty of the heaviness she'd assumed was just the cost of existing. The big bloom pulsed once, twice, then settled into a steady glow that matched the rhythm of her heart. Days blurred in a gentler way afterward. The house, once overrun with petals that refused to sweep, gradually cleared. The greenhouse room remained lush, but its growth slowed. The blossoms did not disappear. They became stable, like a memorial garden that had finally found its shape. Arden's skin, once scattered with blooms, held only faint impressions where they'd been. Small rings of lighter pigment, like sun halos. And at her chest, the great flower remained, softly luminous. It no longer glowed constantly. It responded. When she spoke honestly about her past, not every detail, not every time, but enough, it brightened. When she tried to slip back into old habits of minimization and deflection, its color dulled, petals drooping until she noticed, smiled wryly, and tried again. "You're like a built-in liar detector," she told it one afternoon, watching herself in the mirror. The bloom warmed in amused agreement. Leo would trace the outer edges carefully sometimes, fingertips featherlight. When he didn't get visions anymore. No sudden, forced memories. Just a shared warmth, an understanding that he was touching a map of everything she'd survived. "Does it hurt?" he asked one evening, as they lay side by side, her head on his shoulder. "No," she said. "It's a little heavy sometimes, but not in a bad way. More like wearing something important." "Like armor?" he suggested. "Like an altar," she said softly, "to the fact that I made it." He kissed her hair, the line of her temple, the edge of the bloom. "You did," he said, "and you're still here. And so am I." Outside, wind rustled through the city trees. The apartment felt quieter than it had in months, but not empty. Every now and then a stray petal still appeared, drifting across the floor, caught on the corner of a table. They were rare now. When Arden picked them up, they yielded small, ordinary memories. An inside joke at a cafe, a quiet afternoon reading, the comfort of Leo's hand squeezing hers in a waiting room. The flowers, it seemed, would always be a language her body could use. But they were no longer shouting. They were speaking softly. And she was finally listening. Months later, the syndrome had earned a new name in Arden's mind. Not a disease, not a curse, just bloom. Some mornings she woke entirely human, skin plain, unadorned. Other mornings the big flower at her chest glowed a little stronger, as if sensing weather on the horizon. She never grew as many blossoms as before. She suspected she never would. The garden now was smaller, more intentional, tied to new wounds, new joys, new truths. One particular morning she stood at the kitchen counter making tea, sunlight pouring through the window in a familiar gold sheet. Leo shuffled in, hair a mess, yawning. He reached for a mug, then froze. "Ah," he said, blinking at his own wrist. "Arden?" She turned. On the inside of his wrist, just above the pulse point, a tiny bud had appeared. No bigger than a freckle, its petals barely formed. Its color was soft gold with a hint of pink. He stared. "Okay, either I'm getting your weird condition secondhand, or I spilled turmeric on myself in a really artistic way." Arden stepped closer, heart fluttering in a very particular way. She touched the little bud gently. It warmed under her fingertip, unfurling the smallest amount, just enough to reveal its center. She felt a rush, brief and bright. Leo standing in the florist's shop last week, staring at a bouquet and thinking, "She deserves more than this, but I don't know how to give it to her yet." The mixture of awe and fear he'd felt watching her sleep after the big bloom, the way his chest had hurt with the sheer weight of loving someone who had suffered so much. The words he wanted to say, "I'm in this, all the way, even if it means I bloom too," hovering on his tongue. Arden exhaled, eyes stinging. "This one isn't from pain," she said. "What is it then?" he asked quietly. "Love you haven't said out loud yet," she answered. His face crumpled, just a little. "Guess I should fix that," he murmured. He took her hand, thumb grazing the great flower at her sternum, the little bud on his wrist pulsing in time. "I love you," he said. "Not despite everything. With everything." with all of it. The bud opened one more fraction, petals glowing. Arden laughed, wet and broken and whole. The house seemed to glow a little brighter. Outside the window, the world went on. Traffic, birds, people carrying their invisible wounds. Arden knew most of them would never bloom the way she had. Most bodies didn't speak so loudly. But she also knew this, inside each of them, gardens still existed. Some wild, some trimmed to polite hedges, some overgrown with vines. Hers just happened to show. She pressed her palm over the flower at her chest, feeling its steady warmth. "We bloom," she whispered, "where the heart breaks and where it heals." The flower glowed in agreement. The kettle whistled. The day began. Some scars live on the skin. Some live deeper, in places no one sees. Arden's body chose to bloom where it hurt, to carry every unspoken memory as color and light, until she was ready to hold them herself. We all grow something from the things that break us. Some of us grow walls, some of us grow distance, and some of us grow garden. Thank you for visiting. We really hope you enjoyed this. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Who knows what it will be?